On June 3, 2022, at precisely 6:40 a.m., a cleaning woman entered apartment 407 of the Al-Marina Residences in West Beirut. What she found inside would ignite whispers across intelligence circles and foreign ministries alike. Tariq Haddad was dead. The scene was unnervingly calm. A half-finished cup of Arabic coffee sat on a glass table beside a folded Lebanese newspaper. The television still glowed with static light. Haddad's body was slumped near the window, eyes half open, expression frozen in disbelief. Local police arrived within minutes, sealing the building while neighbors gathered in the narrow corridor. They spoke in low tones, exchanging stories about a quiet man who rarely left his apartment during daylight. Few knew he was a weapons broker. None knew for whom. By afternoon, Beirut's rumor mill was aflame. Reports circulated of strangers with European accents checking into nearby hotels days earlier. A rental car had vanished. Surveillance footage mysteriously disappeared. Something about the death did not belong to ordinary crime. Within 24 hours, the name Tariq Haddad appeared in encrypted chats among journalists, intelligence operatives, and defense analysts. Mossad, some whispered. Others insisted it was an internal dispute within Hamas. The truth, buried beneath coded messages and diplomatic silence, was far more complex. In the stillness of that Beirut morning, an operation years in the making had finally reached its terminal moment, executed with precision, deniability, and the silence of the world's most elusive intelligence service. By nightfall, satellite intercepts were humming. Somewhere in Tel Aviv, a Mossad desk officer confirmed a single encrypted message: package secured. No traceable calls, no celebration, only a silent acknowledgement of success. Tariq Haddad's death was not a coincidence. It was a conclusion. For years, Haddad had been a ghost in the arms trade. His name surfaced in intercepted manifests, whispered among smugglers along the Syrian-Lebanese border. Intelligence dossiers described him as a crucial conduit for Iranian-supplied weapons moving toward Gaza through covert maritime routes. His death mattered because it threatened to collapse a vast clandestine network. Each crate of munitions he arranged meant another escalation in a war that never truly paused. Eliminating him was not only an act of vengeance, it was strategic containment, executed with surgical precision. In Langley, analysts debated the timing. Why Beirut, and why now? Across European intelligence services, the questions echoed through secure lines. Some feared retaliation. Others recognized the familiar signature: a perfectly timed Mossad operation, invisible yet unmistakable. For Israel, it was a victory hidden beneath diplomatic denial. For Hamas, it was a rupture in its supply artery. And for the global intelligence community, it was another reminder that the real wars of the Middle East are fought not on battlefields, but in apartments, hotels, and the shadows between governments. Tariq Haddad's death was a single bullet in a long, invisible war, one whose consequences were only beginning to unfold. Who truly orchestrated the death of Tariq Haddad? Was it Mossad, executing another surgical strike in its relentless shadow campaign? Or was it a betrayal from within his own ranks, a debt settled, a warning delivered under the guise of foreign hands? Why now? Why Beirut, a city already heavy with the weight of hidden wars and overlapping loyalties? What signal was meant to be sent through his lifeless body, discovered in that quiet apartment above the restless Mediterranean? Did someone inside Lebanese intelligence know? Were the watchers being watched, the hunters themselves under surveillance? Each possibility unraveled into another, as if the truth itself were designed to dissolve on contact. Was the coffee poisoned? Was the air in the room manipulated? Had the assassin entered through the door, or through a system of keys passed from one invisible hand to another? And most haunting of all, what did Tariq Haddad know that made him worth killing so precisely, so quietly, so irreversibly? The answers lay scattered across encrypted servers, erased passports, and the minds of operatives who would never speak. Every question deepened the silence. Every clue was another door leading further into the labyrinth of espionage. Tariq Haddad was born on November 14, 1977, in the crowded alleys of the Shatila refugee camp in Beirut. His family were Palestinians displaced from Haifa in 1948, carrying with them faded land deeds and a bitterness, that shaped his earliest memories. His father, Mahmoud Haddad, worked as a mechanic in a rusted garage near Sabra's market, fixing battered trucks that ferried contraband between the south and the capital. His mother, Layla, taught Arabic to children in the camp, insisting that education was the only resistance worth pursuing. Tariq listened, but learned something different. By the age of 10, he had memorized the names of every militia commander who moved through the camp. He watched men with weapons speak softly to frightened locals, understanding that real power did not wear uniforms. It hid behind whispers and money. The Lebanese civil war had ended, but its shadows lingered. Foreign flags flew from rooftops, and intelligence agents recruited from despair. Tariq became a messenger for traders who smuggled fuel and cigarettes. Every delivery earned him a few dollars, but more importantly access to conversations, faces, and secrets. When Israeli jets roared above Beirut in 1996, Tariq stood on a rooftop, fists clenched, swearing that one day he would strike back. That promise, whispered into the smoky air, would define him more than his education or faith. He was not religious then, only restless, a boy shaped by ruins, learning to survive in a world built on hidden arrangements and broken vows. In every story of exile, there is a moment when resentment becomes purpose. For Tariq Haddad, that moment came before he was 15. He was a child born into displacement, molded by the architecture of conflict. His life was already drafted in the margins of a forgotten war, waiting only for the right cause to turn him from a survivor into a weapon. Tariq Haddad's beliefs were never loud. He spoke little of religion, quoted no scripture, and prayed rarely, yet his sense of loyalty burned with near-religious devotion. What guided him was not theology, but arithmetic, power measured in shipments, leverage, and quiet alliances. He distrusted speeches and despised hierarchy. To those who worked with him, he seemed analytical to the point of coldness. He carried a black notebook wherever he went, filled not with thoughts or philosophy, but with names, coordinates, and coded references that only he could decipher. Tariq valued silence. He preferred dim rooms, late hours, and short replies. Associates recalled that he could sit through an entire meeting without uttering more than 3 sentences. When he did speak, his words carried weight. He did not threaten. He simply described outcomes, and those listening believed him. He had odd habits that unsettled those around him. He refused to sleep in the same apartment for more than 6 consecutive nights. He never ate food prepared out of sight. He owned 4 identical wristwatches and set each to a different city: Beirut, Tehran, Gaza, and Tel Aviv. Despite his paranoia, he was strangely courteous. He tipped generously, greeted strangers with respect, and never allowed himself to appear angry. His ideology was precision, his religion control. He believed survival required invisibility, and invisibility required order. Every decision, every meeting, every shipment was planned with mathematic caution. He did not see himself as a criminal or ideologue. In his own logic, he was a necessary conduit, a balance point between chaos and necessity in a world that pretended to despise both but secretly needed them. In the underworld of smuggling and covert logistics, Tariq Haddad was known by many names. Among Hamas operatives, he was called Al-Saif, the sword, a reference to his sharp instincts and unflinching decisiveness. Iranian intermediaries referred to him as the broker, a man who could turn paper promises into physical firepower. Western intelligence services gave him a colder title, Ghost Merchant. His name surfaced in intercepts, but his image rarely matched his passport. Every identity he used was meticulously layered: Syrian engineer, Lebanese businessman, Jordanian trader. He shifted accents like currencies, adapting to each deal with effortless realism. In private, Tariq saw himself differently. He once told a contact in Tripoli, "I am not a soldier, nor a hero. I am the equation that keeps them fighting." He believed history was written by men like him, those who moved unseen between ideologues and governments. He admired efficiency, not martyrdom. Death was a waste unless it changed the balance of fear. That view earned him respect from generals and suspicion from clerics. To his allies, he was indispensable. To his enemies, he was inevitable. To himself, He was simply part of the machinery that kept the conflict alive. The transition came quietly, almost imperceptibly. Tariq Haddad was 24 when he first met a Hamas intermediary in a Beirut cafe, known for its backroom deals and Turkish coffee. The man spoke of Gaza, of embargoes, of the need for parts and channels, not slogans or prayers. Tariq listened and understood immediately. He did not join out of faith but out of function. The years of trading contraband had already made him fluent in the language of risk. Smuggling weapons was simply a new arithmetic, routes instead of roads, payloads instead of cargo, and lives instead of profits. By 2003, he was facilitating shipments between Bekaa Valley suppliers and Syrian border couriers. The work was perilous, but profitable. Each transaction bound him deeper into the web of militant logistics. When Israeli intelligence disrupted one of his early convoys near Homs, he was briefly detained, then released. That was his initiation, the moment he realized the scope of the game. He began cultivating contacts in Tehran through Lebanese intermediaries linked to the Quds force. His role was subtle, never public. He avoided titles, ranks, or political appearances. His weapon was access, not ideology. Hamas provided the demand, Iran the supply, and Tariq the invisible bridge that made both sides indispensable to each other. Over time, his reputation expanded beyond commerce. Commanders consulted him on timing, safe houses, and disguises. He learned to read the psychology of checkpoints, the rhythms of satellite surveillance, and the fragility of alliances. By the time his name appeared in Western intelligence reports, Tariq Haddad was no longer a smuggler. He had become an ecosystem, one that thrived on secrecy, manipulation, and the perpetual hunger of war. His evolution into a militant financier was not an act of rebellion, but of inevitability. The first entry in Tariq Haddad's criminal record appeared in 2005, a smuggling arrest at the port of Tripoli. Authorities found modified shipping crates containing dismantled rifles labeled as industrial equipment. He spent 3 nights in detention before a lawyer, whose name appeared nowhere official, secured his release. The file disappeared within weeks. It was not his first crime, only the first one documented. Before that, Haddad had coordinated fuel diversions from Bekaa to Damascus, forging custom stamps and bribing inspectors. His operations were clean, precise, and never repeated in the same location. Every shipment was a rehearsal for something larger. His first true mistake came in 2007. A truck convoy under his management was intercepted near Zala, revealing electronic components destined for Gaza. Lebanese intelligence agents interrogated him for 42 hours. They described him as calm, articulate, and utterly unmoved. When questioned about his employers, he replied, "You're asking the wrong questions. I work for momentum." After his release, again under mysterious circumstances, he became far more careful. He began traveling under Jordanian papers, registering multiple import companies across Beirut and Sidon. Each company existed long enough to process a few transfers before dissolving into bureaucratic dust. Western intelligence soon linked him to black market intermediaries in Bulgaria, Cyprus, and Sudan. His footprint was spreading, but it remained spectral. Too disciplined for ordinary law enforcement, too indirect for direct military action. Every arrest, every seizure only improved his tradecraft. By 2009, Tariq Haddad had ceased being a local smuggler and entered the quiet hierarchy of international arms brokers. Every move after that placed him deeper within the global architecture of covert warfare, where arrests were not obstacles, but rites of passage. In 2010, Turkish authorities detained Tariq Haddad at Istanbul's Ataturk airport under suspicion of arms trafficking. He was held for 19 days in a counter-terrorism facility, during which time his identity shifted 3 times under interrogation. No verifiable record of his statement survives, only fragments, redacted and contested. When he resurfaced months later in Beirut, rumors spread that he had been tortured. Friends claimed electric shocks and sleep deprivation. Others insisted it was psychological manipulation designed to recruit him as a double agent. He never spoke about it, but something in him had changed. From that period onward, Tariq became less trusting, more methodical. He erased personal ties, moved homes twice in a single month, and stopped using phones entirely. The experience hardened his belief that every system, police, politics, or ideology, was a facade. The only truth was leverage. He began to study intelligence manuals, encryption algorithms, and behavioral interrogation reports. He analyzed them not out of fear, but fascination. To him, torture was not cruelty, it was data acquisition gone primitive. That detachment made him valuable to his handlers and terrifying to his rivals. The 19 days in Turkish custody marked the point when Tariq Haddad stopped being human capital and became a strategic instrument. After his release from Turkish custody, Tariq Haddad no longer operated alone. In late 2011, intelligence intercepts began referencing a new entity called Al-Muqawama Logistics Front, a consortium of middlemen and maritime contractors that appeared legitimate but functioned as an umbrella for weapons procurement. At its core was Haddad. He forged alliances with veterans of the Lebanese smuggling networks and financiers tied to the Iranian Quds Force. The front specialized in acquiring dual-use technology, navigation systems, drone parts, encrypted radios, items easily disguised as civilian imports. Every shipment carried at least 3 layers of falsified paperwork and 4 shell companies. Haddad's network expanded swiftly. He placed trusted lieutenants in Mersin, Port Sudan, and Latakia. Each acted as a blind node, never knowing the full map of operations. Payments moved through cryptocurrency wallets and unregistered money exchangers in Dubai. His ability to mask intent beneath routine commerce made his organization nearly untouchable. Western intelligence agencies struggled to define him. He was not a commander, not a field operative, yet every missile that reached Gaza bore his unseen signature. His genius was decentralization, creating a system that could survive even if he disappeared. By 2015, Al-Muqawama Logistics Front had evolved from a smuggling ring into a hybrid intelligence network, bridging Hamas engineers, Iranian suppliers, and Lebanese intermediaries. Its contracts funded research into longer-range projectiles and encrypted communication modules. In private conversations, Tariq called the group the invisible artery. To him, ideology was a distraction. Sustaining the flow of material meant sustaining control over both sides of the conflict. Through logistics, he had built a quiet empire, one that existed entirely in the gray zones of war, trade, and espionage. By 2016, Tariq Haddad's operations had moved far beyond simple procurement. He was no longer merely supplying weapons, he was brokering power. Through intermediaries in Damascus, he arranged the smuggling of anti-tank missiles disguised as agricultural machinery, moving them across 3 borders in 5 days without a single interception. When rival smugglers attempted to hijack one of his convoys near Baalbek, 2 of them vanished. Their bodies appeared weeks later in the Litani River, bound with steel wire, bearing no bullet wounds. The message was unmistakable. Haddad tolerated no interference. He was not violent by temperament, but his system demanded obedience. He began orchestrating kidnappings to ensure cooperation. In 2017, a customs official's son was abducted in Tripoli after threatening to expose fraudulent manifests. The boy was released unharmed 3 days later, but the official signed off on every shipment thereafter without question. Tariq called it negotiation through leverage. His empire grew darker with each success. He started trafficking not only arms, but intelligence. Lists of informants, coded communications, intercepted data sold to whoever could pay. Mossad analysts noted the shift, describing him as a broker of instability. He had crossed from logistics into the realm of covert influence. Every act of violence around him was masked by paperwork, every death recorded as an accident. Yet whispers followed his name across Beirut's underworld, linking him to unexplained explosions, silenced witnesses, and the quiet disappearances of disloyal subordinates. By 2019, Tariq Haddad was no longer a facilitator. He had become a power center, one defined not by ideology or territory, but by his ability to turn fear itself into currency. The sequence of incidents that marked Tariq Haddad's rise reads like a classified report, each line stamped in quiet dread. It began on February 11, 2018, when a cargo vessel named Al-Noor departed Port Sudan, carrying what was listed as farm machinery. Satellite imaging later revealed hidden containers, surface-to-surface missile parts destined for Gaza. The shipment vanished near the Sinai coast after an unexplained explosion at sea. On May 27, 2019, Haddad met with a Quds Force operative in Damascus under the codename Engineer Farid. The meeting, intercepted by Israeli signals intelligence, outlined plans to move advanced guidance systems through Lebanon using refrigerated trucks. Within weeks, 3 convoys crossed the Syrian border uninspected. Only fragments of one truck were ever recovered. October 4, 2020, a Mossad report documented his presence at the Coral Beach Hotel in Beirut. Surveillance footage showed him meeting with 2 Sudanese nationals later linked to arms factories outside Khartoum. 2 months later, those factories were struck by precision airstrikes never officially claimed. Tariq disappeared for 6 weeks, then resurfaced in Cyprus under a new identity. March 16, 2021. A Hamas courier detained in Turkey confessed under interrogation that the shipments move only when Haddad approves. His control extended to timing rocket deliveries according to ceasefire negotiations, a manipulation of conflict itself. Each event demonstrated the same pattern: precision, compartmentalization, and timing measured in seconds. He moved like a mathematician within chaos, calibrating risk, loss, and deception with clinical detachment. By late 2021, Western intelligence agencies placed him on multiple watch lists. His name appeared in briefings before European parliaments, always accompanied by the same phrase: operationally significant, tactically irreplaceable. The trail of explosions, vanished ships, and ghost companies formed a mosaic only one man could have assembled: Tariq Haddad. On March 12, 2022, European agencies compiled a restricted watch list naming Haddad and aliases. The dossier included passport numbers, shipping patterns, and courier routes. Member states exchanged intercepts and banking leads in secure channels, initiating synchronized surveillance and financial tracking. The United States Treasury sanctioned Haddad on May 3, 2022, freezing assets tied to his companies. Banks received directives to flag suspect transactions and report activity. Compliance teams worked to trace ownership through shell corporations and money exchangers in jurisdictions. Interpol circulated a high-priority advisory in June 2022, requesting member nations deny Haddad entry and report sightings. Not a formal arrest warrant, the notice nevertheless restricted movement, triggered enhanced border checks, and isolated his logistical nodes across the eastern Mediterranean. Israeli intelligence elevated Haddad within threat matrices, labeling him operationally significant. Mossad briefings cataloged manifests, dead drop coordinates, and courier identities. Analysts urged targeted disruption rather than public prosecution to preserve deniability and maintain operational leverage in a fragile regional environment. Gulf financial centers closed accounts and revoked licenses tied to Haddad's front companies. Dubai exchanges and Beirut clearinghouses implemented quiet directives. The financial constrictions slowed payments, hindered procurement, and narrowed maritime and overland routes within weeks across multiple nodes. Human intelligence intensified across Tripoli docks, Latakia warehouses, and Cyprus shipping yards. Informants provided actionable leads for protection and compensation. Arrests produced fragmented documents and phone records that gradually illuminated nodes within Haddad's decentralized procurement, distribution, metadata, and analysis architecture. Clandestine reward posters and discrete hotlines emerged offering multi-million-dollar incentives for information leading to Haddad's capture. Public messaging remained muted, yet the financial inducements signaled unified priority: locate and neutralize him before another consignment altered the tactical balance in Gaza. Legal inquiries paralleled covert operations as prosecutors opened investigations into arms trafficking and money laundering. Mutual legal assistance requests multiplied. Courts signed asset freezes and travel prohibitions. Corporate registries reversed filings linked to his aliases across jurisdictions within days. Promptly, intelligence liaison officers convened regular briefings in secure rooms. Diplomatic cables carried terse warnings of potential retaliation. Embassies adjusted security postures. Naval patrols increased interdiction sweeps. The region experienced a subtle but coordinated tightening aimed at constraining Haddad's operational freedom. By late 2022, Haddad existed as dossier and phantom, present in classified briefings and absent at border checks. He was a flagged name on analyst screens and a ghost to routine inspectors. His elevation to most wanted status triggered operational plans. The first attempt came on August 14, 2022, along the coastal highway near Sidon. Tariq Haddad's vehicle, a black Mercedes E-Class, was struck by a remotely detonated explosive device embedded in a roadside guardrail. The blast tore through the asphalt, but missed the car by seconds. Haddad, who had reportedly delayed his departure by a single phone call, escaped unharmed. No group claimed responsibility. Lebanese media reported it as criminal retaliation. Intelligence analysts knew otherwise. Weeks later, a far subtler attempt unfolded. In October 2022, Haddad fell violently ill after a dinner meeting at a seafood restaurant in Jannah. The symptoms, severe paralysis, convulsions, temporary blindness, resembled exposure to an engineered neurotoxin. He was hospitalized under an alias. Within days, a shadowy medical team arrived, administered chelation treatments, and extracted him from the facility before officials could question him. Samples taken from his bloodstream later vanished from the laboratory archives. By December, Mossad's internal cables referenced Operation Marble Vein, believed to be a second coordinated attempt. Agents infiltrated one of his warehouse compounds near Zal, planting a disguised proximity charge within an oxygen cylinder. A power outage aborted the detonation and the team withdrew undetected. Each failure tightened Haddad's paranoia. He dismissed longtime associates, changed vehicles weekly, and communicated solely through couriers who used written notes burned after delivery. His security grew obsessive. Double-locked apartments, mirrored walls, rotating safe houses mapped on paper but never stored electronically. Foreign intelligence agencies noted the pattern. Surveillance imagery revealed him growing thinner, more cautious, his movements increasingly erratic. To kill him now meant breaching a labyrinth, one woven from fear, precision, and absolute distrust. Yet the persistence of attempts showed the inevitability of outcome. Every survivor's breath deepened the resolve of his pursuers. Each morning Haddad woke. Another cell in Tel Aviv, or perhaps elsewhere, recalibrated its methods. The order had already been written. It was merely awaiting execution. By early 2023, Tariq Haddad existed in perpetual transit, never sleeping twice in the same place, never using the same route, never trusting the same man. He moved through Beirut like a ghost tracing his own obituary. Yet every precaution carried the scent of inevitability. Those who saw him in his final months described a man hollowed by suspicion. He spoke little, ate sparingly, and watched reflections instead of faces. The hunter had become prey. Yet he seemed to understand that escape was not survival, it was postponement. Signals intercepts indicated that Mossad's internal unit, Qaidon, had been reactivated for a priority target of exceptional sensitivity. Analysts knew the designation was rare. It implied political clearance from the highest levels and absolute certainty of intent. Beirut streets whispered of new faces, foreigners who blended too well, taxis that lingered too long. Friends warned Haddad to flee, but he refused. "If they want me," he reportedly said, "they already have me." In the calculus of espionage, inevitability is not fate, it is design. Tariq Haddad's death was no longer a question of if, but when. And somewhere, in a room humming with fluorescent light, that when had already been entered into a timetable. To understand the death of Tariq Haddad, one must first understand the machinery that created him. The Middle East of the 21st century was not a collection of nations, but a web of rival agendas, each pulsing with ideology, oil, and memory. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict was its most enduring scar, a perpetual motion of retaliation that bred men like Haddad as both symptom and instrument. By the early 2000s, Gaza's siege and Lebanon's sectarian fractures had merged into a single, unending theater. Hamas sought range, precision, and deterrence. Israel sought containment, disruption, and deterrence of deterrence. Between them existed an invisible economy of arms, cash, and intelligence. Every missile smuggled, every strike launched, every negotiation stalled, was currency in an unwritten trade of power. Iran's shadow loomed large. Through its Quds force, it cultivated proxies across the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Syria, networks in Iraq, all threads woven toward one purpose: to surround Israel with pressure and parity. Tariq Haddad became one of those threads, a logistical nerve that stitched together the ambitions of Tehran and Gaza. Beirut, long accustomed to serving as neutral ground for conflicting forces, turned into a silent arena. Foreign embassies pulsed with intelligence officers under diplomatic cover. Cargo routes became battlegrounds of signatures and signals rather than soldiers. In that twilight economy, a broker like Haddad was indispensable. His rise coincided with the region's transformation from ideological conflict to technological warfare. Drones replaced suicide bombers, encryption replaced slogans, and assassinations replaced invasions. The battlefield was no longer defined by borders, but by networks, and every network required a gatekeeper. Tariq Haddad was that gatekeeper. His life was an algorithm of tension between survival and allegiance. To eliminate him was not vengeance, it was strategy. He represented a junction in the circuitry of Middle Eastern geopolitics, a node whose removal promised, however briefly, to disrupt the flow of power. Each nation involved in Tariq Haddad's story viewed him through a different prism: ally, criminal, or tool. For Israel, he was a threat multiplier, a logistics genius who transformed ideology into armament. His removal was not a choice, but an operational necessity. Inside Tel Aviv's intelligence directorates, his name appeared under Category 7, targets whose elimination required ministerial authorization and diplomatic insulation. Iran saw him as an invaluable conduit. Through Haddad, Tehran could project power without exposure. He provided the logistics that turned Iranian influence into tangible capability for Hamas and Hezbollah. Iranian handlers referred to him not as a subordinate but as a coordinator of trust. His independence ensured plausible deniability, his precision ensured results. Lebanon, meanwhile, stood precariously between tolerance and fear. Officially neutral, unofficially complicit, its fractured security apparatus contained factions loyal to competing patrons. Some protected Haddad's roots for money, others turned blind eyes for politics. To the Lebanese state, he was both a liability and a necessity, the cost of surviving between greater powers. Turkey played its dual role, hosting discreet channels while condemning public violence. Its intelligence service tracked him quietly, sometimes exchanging data with Western partners, sometimes withholding it for leverage. In Ankara's calculus, Haddad was both bargaining chip and warning sign, a figure whose existence affirmed Turkey's strategic indispensability. The United States, cautious yet involved, treated him as a regional destabilizer. Sanctions and watch lists were tools of containment, not pursuit. Washington preferred distance. Assassinations carried diplomatic risk. Yet its intelligence community shared data freely when Israeli operations advanced, maintaining what officials called informal alignment of interests. Egypt remained ambivalent. Its security forces monitored smuggling tunnels in Rafah and received fragments of intelligence that occasionally mentioned Haddad. Cairo's concern was stability, not ideology. If his shipments avoided Egyptian soil, his existence was tolerated. Europe's position was bureaucratic rather than moral. Europol, Interpol, and individual intelligence agencies cataloged his movements, but seldom intervened. He existed in their systems as metadata, a ghost threading through compliance reports and classified alerts. In the chessboard of Middle Eastern geopolitics, Tariq Haddad was a pawn mistaken for a knight. Every country knew his value, none admitted it. His death, when it came, would serve everyone's narrative and no one's truth. Tariq Haddad mattered because he existed in the thin, invisible space between governments and their denials. He was not a commander or ideologue, yet his work altered the operational tempo of a conflict spanning generations. He did not launch missiles, but he made their launch possible. His influence was logistical, financial, and psychological, a triad that sustained the machinery of resistance. Within Hamas, Haddad was the unseen architect of supply. When political leaders promised new weapons or tactical surprises, it was his shipments that transformed rhetoric into capability. His precision scheduling allowed rockets to arrive during ceasefire negotiations, reminding opponents that diplomacy and warfare were never truly separate. His role blurred the line between combatant and facilitator, making him indispensable yet expendable. To Iran, Haddad represented a self-sustaining conduit, a civilian face for military ambition. Through him, Tehran could expand influence into Gaza without exposing command structures. He symbolized the efficiency of indirect warfare. One man coordinating hundreds of shipments, linking continents through encrypted messages and false invoices. His assassination would not only disrupt operations, but also expose the quiet sophistication of Iran's logistical outreach. For Israel, eliminating him was symbolic and strategic. Mossad analysts argued that his removal would fracture supply routes, delay technological upgrades, and create internal distrust within Hamas's procurement chain. More importantly, his death would send a message to every broker operating in that shadow market, that Israel could reach anyone, anywhere, regardless of border or flag. In the broader geopolitical mosaic, Haddad's existence demonstrated how individuals could become microstates, autonomous systems influencing national outcomes. His transactions shifted alliances, redirected funding, and dictated the pace of hostilities. He was a reminder that modern warfare was no longer fought solely by armies, but by brokers, financiers, and codebreakers whose signatures were written in invisible ink. Tariq Haddad mattered because he made the machinery of perpetual conflict work efficiently. Removing him was not the end of a man. It was an attempt to pause a mechanism that had learned to operate without pause. The first operative arrived in Beirut on May 26, 2022, aboard a Turkish Airlines flight from Istanbul under the alias Daniel Levin. He was a 38-year-old Israeli-born national traveling on a forged Swiss passport. Two more followed within 48 hours, Elena Raskin, posing as a freelance journalist, and Jonas Meyer, listed as a logistics consultant for a European energy firm. Their arrival times were staggered, their hotel choices unconnected, their digital traces immaculate. All three were members of Mossad, the operational branch of Mossad specializing in assassinations abroad. Their mission file carried the codename Operation Cedar Cross. Within its encrypted brief was a single objective: neutralize target Tariq Haddad in Beirut without attribution or collateral. They carried minimal equipment, no firearms, no explosive devices. Their weapons were concealment, patience, and precision. One operative brought a custom medical kit containing an aerosolized nerve inhibitor designed to induce cardiac arrest while leaving autopsy readings inconclusive. Another transported a disguised communications relay hidden in a portable power bank, connecting them to handlers in Herzliya. Upon arrival, the team split into separate quadrants of the city. Levin rented a small Peugeot under a corporate fleet account. Raskin registered a press credential with an international media front. Meyer moved into an Airbnb overlooking Hamra Street. None spoke to the others in public. They communicated through dead drops, Wi-Fi beacons, and coded SMS bursts scheduled via anonymous cloud servers. Surveillance protocols activated within hours, photographing entrances, mapping escape routes, and logging the rhythms of Tariq Haddad's movements. Beirut, accustomed to spies, barely noticed three more ghosts entering its bloodstream. Yet in those quiet days of late May, the machinery of an invisible state began to hum, preparing for one of its most delicate operations in recent memory. By May 28, 2022, the operatives had fully embedded themselves in Beirut's landscape. Daniel Levin checked into the Palm Suites Hotel near Rauchet, paying in cash and declining daily housekeeping. His room faced the Mediterranean, a deliberate choice that allowed a rear exit through the service corridor leading directly to an alleyway. Elena Raskin chose the Commodore Hotel in Hamra, posing as a journalist writing about post-war reconstruction. Jonas Meyer occupied an unremarkable serviced apartment in Gemayze, close enough to observe Haddad's known haunts yet far enough to avoid detection. For 6 days, they constructed the routine of invisibility. Levin posed as a tourist photographing street art and harbor lights, while secretly capturing time-stamped imagery of Haddad's building entrances. Raskin attended embassy press gatherings, collecting fragments of gossip about local security shifts and hotel surveillance gaps. Meyer coordinated logistics, synchronizing vehicle routes and backup extraction points under cover of consulting work. Tariq Haddad's movements were recorded with forensic detail. His morning coffee run at 7:12 a.m., his evening walks along Corniche, his preference for sitting near corner tables facing mirrors. He met couriers irregularly, always changing locations, yet unknowingly maintained a pattern of returning to Al-Marina Residences before dawn. Using disguised antennas, the operatives triangulated his cell signal, mapping digital proximity to ensure precision timing. Every data point was transmitted through encrypted relays to an operations analyst in Tel Aviv, known only as Oren. From there, approval codes and adjustments were sent back in micro-packets disguised as harmless push notifications. On June 1st, Levin moved into a short-term apartment 2 floors below Haddad's unit. He brought only a backpack, a toolbox, and a plausible cover story as an electrical contractor. Surveillance was complete. The stage, quietly and efficiently, had been built around the target. June 3, 2022. Dawn slid across Beirut like a muted secret. The Mediterranean glimmered pale silver beneath the first light, and from his rented flat in Rauchet, Daniel Levin exhaled slowly, checking his wristwatch twice. The operation window had opened. Each operative moved with the precision of rehearsed silence. At 06:10 a.m., Elena Raskin positioned herself in a parked taxi near the Corniche, camera poised, appearing every bit the disinterested journalist documenting morning fishermen. Through her lens, she had direct line of sight to the entrance of Al-Marina Residences. 2 floors below Haddad's apartment, Levine activated a modified endoscope camera through the ceiling vent. It relayed a thermal feed directly to Jonas Meyer, stationed in a van disguised as an air conditioning service unit outside. The signal displayed Haddad's body heat signature moving slowly across his living room, awake, restless, unaware. At 06:31, a final go code, Psalm 72, appeared on Levin's encrypted device. Within seconds, he moved to the stairwell, gloved, hooded, and calm. The aerosol device, concealed in a maintenance tool resembling a voltage tester, was ready. It carried microdoses of a compound derived from organophosphates, engineered to mimic cardiac arrest. Haddad opened his door at 06:36, responding to a knock he believed was building maintenance. Levin stepped forward with a courteous nod, mentioning electrical inspection. The exchange lasted less than 20 seconds. A brief pulse of gas released as Levin adjusted a faux power socket on the wall. Haddad inhaled imperceptibly, blinked twice, then nodded. Levin thanked him, gathered his tools, and walked out. By 06:39, he was on the street. Meyer dismantled the relay system, erasing digital traces. Raskin deleted the morning footage, replacing it with real photographs of Beirut's skyline. At 06:40, Haddad collapsed near the window, coffee still steaming beside him. His pulse fluttered, slowed, and stopped. The team regrouped separately, as protocol demanded. No words were exchanged. A single encrypted message left Beirut minutes later. Package secured, no exposure. Within hours, the operatives had checked out, blending into departing tourists and business travelers. By sunset, they had become what they always were: shadows crossing borders, leaving only silence behind. In operational briefings, Mossad used euphemism, precision, deniability, timing, and listed items like disguised cases, tradecraft manuals, counterfeit credentials, and innocuous electronics repurposed for observation. Each selection emphasized minimal traceability, tested to avoid forensic discovery, and preserve official plausible deniability altogether. Surveillance relied on layered observation, human assets, commercial CCTV, and modified consumer tech that broadcast anonymized feeds. Analysts triangulated movements without ever touching a physical log. Their priority was pattern recognition and temporal precision rather than kinetic solutions or disruption. Forged documents and currencies were crafted by discreet ateliers with names never spoken aloud. False corporate shells, plausible invoices, and rented storage units created legal facades. Financial pathways were compartmentalized through third parties to obscure beneficiaries without leaving a trail. Counter-surveillance protocols were ritualized, varying routes, staged encounters, and redundant identities. Operatives practiced silence and plausible routines, training to absorb suspicion and deflect attention. Their greatest tool was ordinariness, blending into markets, taxis, and cafes until extraction windows closed without fanfare. Medical concealment prioritized ambiguities over certainties. Operation medics used techniques intended to mimic natural causes, complicating autopsy interpretation without specifying agents or procedures. The aim was forensic ambiguity, an unremarkable death certificate that would discourage intrusive inquiry from other coroners. Communications were ephemeral by design: burner devices, transient Wi-Fi beacons, and disposable relays that self-erased logs. No central server stored movements. Analysts transmitted micro-updates encoded in innocuous files to minimize interception risk, ensuring that any post-facto reconstruction would be fragmentary. Legal and diplomatic cover was multi-layered. Shell NGOs, plausible journalistic fronts, research projects with sponsorship. These facades provided both mobility and moral ambiguity, allowing operatives to move under neutral flags while governments expressed regret and avoided detailed inquiries thereafter. Beyond equipment, tradecraft depended on human calculation. Timing decisions made in secure rooms, moral compromises weighed by committees, and political wins factored into target selection. The tools mattered, but the decision to use them revealed the deepest truths of statecraft. A single misstep can ruin an operation. A dropped tool, a misplaced glance, a curious neighbor. On the morning of the strike, a child lingered in the corridor and peered into the stairwell. Levin froze, then regained his practiced smile. A power outage 2 blocks away threatened to scramble electronic surveillance. Meyer felt the relay stutter and whispered into a burner. A passing patrol car slowed, its headlights searching. Raskin kept her camera steady and breathed silently through the fear. A neighbor opened a door. Warm light spilled onto the landing, revealing Levin's silhouette. He flattened himself against plaster, heart pounding, toolbox clutched beneath his jacket. The neighbor muttered about deliveries and closed the door, unaware he had missed it. Moments later, a courier arrived with a forged medical report. Haddad's doorman argued softly. Levin watched from shadow, breath shallow. A stray dog barked twice, and Raskin felt seconds stretch into an eternity. Precision depended on such fragile instants alone. Once the window closed, the operatives dispersed anonymously. Each returned to a civilian life recalibrated for secrecy. A studio, a shuttered laptop, a mailbox emptied of traces. The city resumed rhythms, indifferent to the thin thread of violence it carried. At 06:40 a.m., Tariq Haddad's breathing faltered. He stood near the open window, the pale reflection of dawn flickering across his face. For a moment, he appeared merely dizzy, one hand reaching toward the curtain, the other gripping the edge of the table. Then without sound or struggle, he collapsed. The toxin worked swiftly, silently, dissolving into his bloodstream and disrupting neural impulses. Within 40 seconds, his pulse ceased. The body slumped naturally, leaving no trace of external trauma. The coffee cup tipped, spilling a dark bloom across the rug that masked any faint chemical residue. Outside, Beirut stirred to its ordinary morning rhythm. Vendors shouting, traffic honking, radios humming fragments of news. Inside apartment 407, the air remained still, sterile, almost reverent. The television continued to play muted static, a mechanical hum marking the passage of seconds. By 07:10, the first resident knocked on his door, complaining of an electrical flicker. There was no answer. 20 minutes later, the cleaner entered with her passkey, and history shifted by inches. When the authorities arrived, the scene presented itself as unremarkable, a man dead of apparent heart failure. But for those who understood, the silence itself was the signature. Mossad's finest work leaves nothing behind but absence. At 07:32 a.m., the cleaner, a woman named Samira Khoury, entered apartment 407 with her passkey. The air felt heavy, metallic, touched by the faint odor of burnt coffee. Tariq Haddad lay motionless beside the open window, eyes half closed, expression neutral. Neither pain nor peace, only stillness. Samira froze, whispering his name twice before backing away. She called the building manager, who arrived minutes later with 2 security guards. They assumed exhaustion, perhaps a stroke. An ambulance was summoned, sirens echoing through the narrow streets. The paramedics checked his pulse, then exchanged a glance that confirmed nothing could be done. The body was moved gently onto a stretcher. His wristwatch, one of 4 identical timepieces, continued to tick, marking seconds he no longer possessed. Outside, curious neighbors gathered, murmuring speculations: heart attack, poisoning, curse. The police sealed the apartment by 0820, photographing every surface. By mid-morning, journalists from Al-Mayadeen and Reuters appeared, tipped off anonymously. Beirut's rumor mill spun at full speed. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle, yet an undercurrent of something foreign hung in the air. Unseen by all, a single encrypted message left a Tel Aviv server that same hour. It contained 2 words only: Cedar complete. At 10:45 a.m., the body of Tariq Haddad arrived at the American University of Beirut Medical Center. The attending coroner, Dr. Nabil Farah, recorded the preliminary cause as sudden cardiac arrest. The temperature of the body suggested death occurred less than an hour before discovery. No bruises, no needle marks, no contusions, nothing visible to contradict a natural cause. When the autopsy began, subtle anomalies appeared. The lungs showed faint discoloration inconsistent with heart failure, and the pupils retained an unusual dilation pattern. Chemical toxicology tests revealed traces of an organophosphate compound, but in concentrations so minimal, they were deemed inconclusive. The report phrased it delicately: presence of unidentified chemical derivatives. Further testing required. A second pathologist quietly noted the absence of petechial hemorrhaging, typical in sudden cardiac events. He recommended full histological analysis, but the order was never processed. By June 6th, the official report was finalized: natural death, likely cardiac arrhythmia. Case closed. Unverified whispers circulated within the hospital. 2 strangers in plain suits visited the morgue that afternoon, signed no names, and photographed the file. The next morning, the blood samples marked for retesting had vanished from cold storage. No alarms triggered, no inquiries followed. Beirut's silence resumed. 3 days after the death, Lebanese internal security investigators reviewed CCTV footage from Al-Marina Residences. To their frustration, the cameras covering the 4th-floor corridor had gone dark, precisely between 06:20 and 06:50 a.m., the narrow window during which Tariq Haddad died. Maintenance logs showed no scheduled power cuts, yet a technician's access card had been used at 06:18, 1 minute before the blackout. The technician, when questioned, insisted the card had been stolen. Another feed from a nearby cafe revealed a man in overalls leaving the building moments after the outage ended. His gait was steady, his expression calm. The footage was blurred but showed a narrow wrist and a distinctive silver watch. Attempts to trace him failed. The cafe's storage drive was wiped by unknown software 2 hours later. Parallel to the CCTV inquiry, airport authorities flagged a cluster of suspicious passports. 2 European nationals, Daniel Levin and Elena Raskin, had departed Beirut on June 4th, boarding separate flights to Istanbul and Geneva. Their travel documents, later cross-referenced with Interpol databases, matched no official records. The biometric chips were cloned from genuine Swiss and Latvian identities, both reported stolen months earlier. When this discovery reached the press, headlines erupted across Beirut. Foreign agents in death of Hamas financier. The government promised transparency, but statements remained vague. Diplomatic missions quietly exchanged notes, and Western embassies restricted comment. Within intelligence circles, the pattern was unmistakable. The forged passports bore craftsmanship associated with Mossad operations, fonts, lamination methods, and serial clusters identical to those used in the Dubai assassination of Mahmoud al-Mabhouh in 2010. The implication was clear, but unspoken. Publicly, officials cited ongoing investigation. Privately, the case file was sealed, transferred to military intelligence archives, and never reopened. Beirut, accustomed to mysteries, absorbed another without protest. The international response unfolded in whispers rather than declarations. On June 7, 2022, Hamas released an official statement mourning Tariq Haddad as a dedicated son of the resistance. Their rhetoric was restrained, No threats, no vows of vengeance, only an acknowledgement that his work will continue. Analysts noted the tone, sorrow without outrage, implying knowledge of Mossad's hand and the futility of retaliation. In Tel Aviv, the Israeli government neither confirmed nor denied involvement. A spokesperson offered a carefully rehearsed phrase, "Israel will defend itself against those who arm terror." Inside intelligence circles, the operation was quietly celebrated. The Prime Minister's office received a sealed folder marked Operational Success, No Compromise. Across Europe, murmurs grew louder. Swiss and Latvian officials demanded explanations regarding the cloned passports, citing violations of sovereignty. Diplomatic protests were filed through back channels, but the momentum of outrage faded quickly. Western governments understood the context, an unspoken consensus that Haddad's removal served broader security interests. In Tehran, the reaction was different. State media accused Israel of cowardly assassination. Within weeks, 2 Israeli-linked businesses in northern Iraq were struck by drone fire, an unofficial retaliation that killed none but sent a message. Lebanon's government promised investigation but avoided confrontation. Ministers spoke vaguely of foreign interference, while quietly ensuring the case would never reach parliamentary inquiry. The story vanished from front pages within 10 days, replaced by domestic scandals and fuel shortages. For ordinary Beirutis, Haddad's death became another rumor layered onto decades of secrets. For intelligence professionals, it was a new case study, proof of Mossad's precision and the vulnerability of shadow economies. By July, the world had moved on, yet within the archives of a dozen agencies his name remained flagged, cross-referenced, classified, and annotated with one word: eliminated. Beneath every assassination lies a machinery unseen, an empire of silence sustained by paperwork and signatures that never existed. The phantom bureaucracy begins not with agents, but with clerks, anonymous men and women who erase trails with immaculate precision. It is a realm of memos written in neutral language, directives disguised as budget revisions, and approvals stamped by those who never truly read them. This is where operations are born, not in field meetings or secret bunkers, but in administrative silence. Mossad, like all great intelligence institutions, thrives on this bureaucratic invisibility. The decision to kill Tariq Haddad passed through legal committees, linguistic filters, and moral abstractions until it became policy without name or author. No one could be blamed. Everyone was responsible. These agencies exist as shadow empires, running parallel to elected governments, yet answerable to none. They maintain their own hierarchies, their own economies, even their own myths. Within their archives, history is not recorded. It is engineered. The phantom bureaucracy is not villainous. It is efficient. It ensures that decisions are detached from emotion, that justice, or vengeance, arrives wrapped in deniability, and when the work is done, it files itself away, awaiting the next authorization. In these corridors of paper and power, death is simply another form processed, stamped, and quietly archived. Within that bureaucracy operate the invisible legions, the nameless field units whose existence is acknowledged only in code. They are fragments of state will, trained to vanish, summoned not by glory, but by the quiet urgency of necessity. The unit known as Qaidon, Mossad's covert arm of assassins, functions as myth and mechanism. Its operatives are multilingual, emotionally untraceable, and bound by contracts that erase identity the moment they sign. Their loyalty is transactional only to purpose. Each operative embodies an archetype. The watcher, patient and unseen, recording patterns until seconds become opportunities. The courier, who carries messages no one may read. The surgeon, whose weapon is precision disguised as care. Together they form the anatomy of state violence. Their training rejects ideology. Emotion is interference, hesitation, treason. They live among civilians, blend into airports, cafes, and hotel lobbies. Their weapons are ordinary things: pens, phones, air vents. Their battlegrounds are corridors, elevators, and rooms smaller than memory. History calls them ghosts, yet their signatures shape global equilibrium. Every regime has its own version, every democracy its own necessary darkness. They are the thin, invisible thread between security and denial, the human instruments of decisions too secret to confess. Every operation leaves behind echoes, fragments of whispered history carried through corridors and safe houses. They are not stories told aloud, but murmured warnings for the next generation of ghosts preparing to act without existing. In 1960, a Mossad team in Buenos Aires abducted Adolf Eichmann, architect of genocide, disguised as an airline technician. The mission became legend, not for its violence, but for its restraint, proof that the state could turn vengeance into procedure. 2 decades later, in Lillehammer, Norway, another team assassinated the wrong man, mistaking an innocent waiter for a Black September operative. That error bled across borders, a reminder that even precision breeds consequence. Mossad learned, adapted, and rewrote the art of silence. In 1997, agents in Amman attempted to poison Khalid Mashal, a Hamas leader, using a fast-acting neurotoxin. They were caught. Diplomats intervened. Israel was forced to send the antidote. The embarrassment scarred reputations but refined future doctrine. Speed, invisibility, no loose ends. Every generation since has inherited those ghosts. Each mission bears a trace of the past, a gesture, a technique, a scar. From Buenos Aires to Beirut, from Eichmann to Haddad, the pattern endures. Decisions made in fluorescent rooms, executed in rented apartments. History never ends. It mutates. The ghosts merely change passports. Behind every silent trigger and vanished passport sit the gods of bureaucracy, ministers, generals, and advisors who weigh lives like variables on a chart. They sign no orders, yet every death bears their invisible fingerprints in ink that never dries. They speak in euphemisms, containment, stability, mitigation. In their calculus, morality is negotiable, and truth is an inconvenience. They are the puppet masters of plausible deniability, ruling empires of silence from air-conditioned rooms. When Tariq Haddad died, these men did not celebrate. They simply moved to the next file, the next target, the next decision. Their world is perpetual maintenance of the abyss. Tariq Haddad's funeral took place 3 days after his death, beneath the fractured sunlight of a Beirut afternoon. The procession was modest. Family, a few colleagues, and silent figures watching from a distance. No banners, no speeches, only the low hum of prayer and the rhythmic thud of earth over wood. Hamas issued a statement of mourning from Gaza, calling him a loyal son of the cause. In Tehran, a moment of silence was observed in a Quds Force meeting. In Tel Aviv, his file was moved from active to closed. No triumph, no denial, just a shift of category. Lebanon's newspapers published obituaries without photographs, careful to avoid naming affiliations. The apartment building at Al-Marina was disinfected, repainted, and re-rented within weeks. To neighbors, he became another rumor in a city addicted to forgetting. Yet in private circles, his absence was felt immediately. Shipments stalled, payments froze, and encrypted channels fell silent. His death created a void not of grief, but of logistics, a sudden paralysis within the machinery he had built. In the language of espionage, that was his true burial, the day his network stopped breathing. The world moved on, but the system he fed began to starve. Months after Tariq Haddad's death, the invisible ripples began to reach distant shores. Hamas struggled to rebuild its procurement chain, turning to less reliable intermediaries. Quality declined, deliveries slowed, and mistrust seeped into every encrypted channel. Commanders whispered of betrayal, not yet realizing the architecture itself had collapsed. Iran redirected resources, replacing human couriers with digital proxies and remote finance systems. The Quds Force grew cautious, increasing compartmentalization to prevent another Haddad-shaped vulnerability. Intelligence analysts quietly observed that his death had forced innovation, a restructuring born of necessity and fear. In Beirut, the smuggling syndicates fragmented. Old alliances dissolved into rivalries as Haddad's protection vanished. Informants multiplied, deals turned violent, and within a year, the once stable shadow economy became chaotic. Mossad analysts monitored the turbulence with measured satisfaction, yet they knew such victories were temporary. Assassinations, however precise, rarely ended networks, they merely scattered them. New brokers emerged, each more reckless than the last, learning from his methods, not his caution. The legacy of Tariq Haddad became paradoxical. His elimination weakened the system but ensured its evolution. He was gone, yet his blueprint survived, replicated in fragments across borders. In erasing him, the architects of order had unknowingly preserved his design. In the end, Tariq Haddad's death changed little in the grand machinery of geopolitics. Ships still sailed, wars still smoldered, and governments still spoke of peace while funding shadows. But what his story revealed was unsettling. A world where states wage invisible wars through men who never truly exist. His death was not an ending, merely an edit in a script written by unseen hands. Somewhere, another dossier was already being drafted, another target selected, another myth prepared. In the realm of espionage, truth does not die. It is buried alive beneath the weight of state silence.